Greetings, friends. Reformed Stoic, back with another video. So, getting back up on the horse, getting back into the swing of things, I figured I would cover the topic of what it would look like if society started to collapse. Now, I thought of this little bit of comic relief before we jump into a serious topic. I lost Guitar Center drum off, so now society is going to collapse. It's not like that. It's not like that. Hey, you know what, guys? I took a long drive, stayed in a motel. I watched some cable television. I watched Roadhouse at a motel. I had some food. I took some rest stops. It was an adventure. And actually, to cheer myself up a little bit, I actually predicted this. I told people way back when I first started, I will probably get invited to compete in person, and it will be very difficult to go further than that. So, because I got invited to compete, that means I was the top 400 in the competition. I was within the top 400, and everybody, they took one winner from each competing store, 27. So that's whittling from 400 down to 27. I speculated today, considering that I think I was probably in the top 3 at that store. That means I'm within the top 100. Anyway, moving on with life, let's talk about society collapsing. And I think that it's something relevant to real life. I don't think it's just something in my head, a coping mechanism, but let's just speculate here, you know? Let's talk about what it might look like, particularly in the United States. So some background information on what's going to lead to this theoretical collapse. I think it has almost everything to do with gender relationships. We'll put it like that. This is kind of a sensitive topic right now because there was just some sort of a shooter. I actually don't know that many details about it. These shooters pop up all the time, and then they write manifestos, and then it's almost like it's my job to read the manifestos, but then if you do, people are like, "You read the manifesto? That's weird." All I know is that his manifesto centered around the topic of hypergamy. He basically said that everything wrong with society could be boiled down to hypergamy in dating, which is women being hyper-selective. And that's awkward because I feel like that's kind of relevant to what I'm about to say. That's very 2026 for you. I just don't know the right way to say this anymore. Like, it's been established that there's shooters. That's something that's been happening for a long time. It's been established that they write manifestos. Sometimes their manifestos are kind of wacky, out there, schizobabble. Sometimes their manifestos say some kind of real shit. Now, what does that mean about me, about society, about whatever? I mean, it's just... This is 2026. This video is talking about something that I think is very realistic. So, how do I just get through this to the next part? The shooter wrote a manifesto saying that hypergamy is a problem. I also think that hypergamy is a relevant issue, though this isn't just about women's selection of men, but that does have something to do with it. I don't know. I don't know how to give the perfect disclaimer. I'm a fucking chud, piece of shit, and moving on. Okay. So that's been established. So basically, what I think is going to lead to this societal collapse is that women have been given everything. See, that's not the same as hypergamy. But what happens when you give women a lot, when you give women abundance, they become more selective of men. If you give men abundance, they have the means to attract a woman and start a family. But when you take the abundance away, because it's ultimately a zero-sum game. Zero-sum game is kind of a fancy word. It means something very simple. It means there is a limited amount of abundance, is what we'll call it. So you can either give the abundance to men or women. Now, could it be like partially to men and partially to women? Sure. But more or less, the way that like feminists talk about society is that everything before the 70s was patriarchy. That's safe to say that that's what they think. So the way that society has basically played out is that either men had the abundance or women had the abundance. When men have the abundance, they have the means to attract a woman and start a family and build a stake in society. When you take the abundance away from men, they lose that stake in society and ability to attract a woman. When you give it to women, their standard for what they want in a man skyrockets. All of a sudden, it's harder for these men to attract women, and it's harder for women to find men attractive. Now let's keep going with that. Once women have higher standards for men, they start to create harems for a small percentage of men. And what happens when these small percentage of men have such an unlimited access to women and sex is that they do not settle. So all the women are going for a small portion of men who don't settle. So these women are also arguably not able to get married. It's a little bit more complex with women because if they were willing to settle for a less attractive man, they could get married, but it seems like a lot of them don't. And it seems like as time goes on, the lesser attractive men are wising up and not even offering to marry these women. A saying that has been kind of a folk saying for the last 10 years is that women control the access to sex, but men control the access to relationships, and I would go as far as to say marriage. So that's a lot to say, and I will just fully disclaimer that this is my opinion. This is my thoughts. I did not read the guy's manifesto. If that's very similar to what he said, then that's a very unfortunate coincidence for me. But what I was trying to say is that in 2026 and moving forward toward this collapsing society that I guess isn't literally happening right now. I mean, this is maybe like 10, 5, 2 weeks away. This is something that is pretty much already happening right now. But yes, a part of it is there will be people, probably men, losing their shit and going crazy and making manifestos, and those manifestos are going to be very relevant to what is happening. Now, what does that do? What it seems to do is it turns anybody who acknowledges these same problems as the wacko shooter into they're viewed as potentially bad, dangerous people. And the situation in society becomes more and more and more pressing, and there's more and more of these lone wolf wackos, and their manifestos get more and more and more litty because we're kind of just dancing around if this kind of like cheap piece of shit, outdated little MP3 player can be the obvious truth that people are dancing around, and then men are kind of afraid to acknowledge because at this point, like 30 shooters have written their manifestos about it. I mean, at the end of the day, Ted Kaczynski's manifesto was litty. So that's kind of giving you some of the background. So now here's some of the details of what I think it's going to look like. Men have already been leaving society. There's already TikToks and articles from women. Where are all the men going? Men, please go to bars. Men, please do this and that. Now, whenever men like me say that this is happening, like, yeah, that's right, girls, we're gone. we went our own way. They're like, oh my gosh, you are a huge incel loser. That's really still what happens when men chime in on this stuff at all. It's like it's a shaming tactic. And a lot of men, I don't want people to call me an incel. I don't want people to call me a loser. So I will not talk about this, the obvious pressing subject that pretty much, at least on an unconscious level, everybody realizes is what's happening, especially as the statistics and the studies all point toward this. The obvious truth that on some level, the majority of people are running away from and hiding from, and they whoosh, 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 whip anybody who tries to talk about it and shame them. Now, people like me, I guess you could say, is like a revolting chud who just, you whip me, you're an incel, you're an incel, you're an incel, and it doesn't fucking work because, I don't know, because I'm the chosen one or I'm a huge fucking chud. Somewhere in between, it just doesn't work. I've already been being socially mocked for a very long time. I've already had people try to ruin my life time and time and time again. Something very powerful that some chud on the internet said was, you can keep beating a horse. When you're riding a horse, you can keep beating it to go faster. Eventually the horse lies down on the ground and says, it hurts more to move than it hurts to get whipped. So like, ha, I am whipping you. It's like, yes, and I am lying on the ground, collapsed in exhaustion. I don't care that you're whipping me. I'm not going to move anymore. That's kind of like where I'm at. Society has tried to manipulate me with social shaming my entire life, and eventually gets to a point where it's like, hey, you know what? It's not so bad for angry hordes of normies to try to ruin your life every fucking day. It's not really that bad. I'd rather just keep living my life the way I am and deal with the social shame, which is just by cutting people out of your life and not having a normie social media, and it's really not that bad. And it's not just me. There's a lot of guys living like this, and there's going to be more and more and more men living like this. And what happens there's normies cracking the whip, and then there's the media cracking the whip. So as more men continue to leave society, the normie news is going to be like, there are men leaving society, and it's because they believe the kind of stuff that's in shooter manifestos, and they're really, really, really horrible, bad people. And, report it to us if anybody says anything that makes it sound like they believe that kind of stuff, which has already been happening for a long time. I believe the whole see something, say something, Patriot Act was weaponized basically on right-wing conservative men, particularly men who spoke out on dating and relationships, and it was labeled incel rhetoric, and incel was labeled some sort of an internet hate group. And I truly believe that men who spoke out on these kind of societal hypergamy type of scenarios were being labeled domestic terrorists by our government. And there was big, big, big funding because the term incel has been watch listed by FBI and Department of Homeland Security. And I think on some level that era has already kind of passed, because there's been a lot of studies and data that has basically proven every single incel talking point to be true. So, I was thinking about making this video earlier, and I wanted to use the term League of Shadows, which is like the group from the Christopher Nolan Batman movies, like where Batman's origins are. I gotta say, I recently watched through the Nolan Batman movie trilogy. I think the first one was the best. I think the second one was a little bit overhyped. I've seen that one way too many times. It's great. I love all of them. But I do kind of feel like the first one was the best, because it really just hones in on the League of Shadows. But the reason I wanted to invoke the League of Shadows, which I feel like I'm having deja vu, I think I've already invoked this somewhere else in my video catalog. I've made a lot of videos at this point. I don't remember where I used it, but it sounds familiar in relevance to my channel. I wanted to invoke the League of Shadows because all of these men that are leaving society, nobody knows who the fuck they are. It's going to get so bad, and it has already gotten bad. And the more that they crack this whip and try to shame people, the more that men who are on the verge of leaving are going to say, you know what? These fucking chuds are right. Like, I'm leaving too. Men are just going to continue to leave. And eventually, when the normies are basically forced to almost care, it's going to be like, okay, well, do you know a guy who left society? No. Do you know? Do you like, who the fuck are these guys? It's guys who nobody fucking cares about. It is people who have not had friends or contacts or community for over a decade. And when they left society, you know, there's an episode of Friends where George Costanza from Seinfeld, whatever that actor's name is, he calls Phoebe on the ACK hotline. Actually, now that I think of the topic of this video, I'm not going to be able to discuss it. But he's in his office and he's not doing well, and he stands up in the middle of his cubicle and says, "Hey everybody, I'm gonna do something crazy," you know, just paraphrasing. And nobody looks up, nobody cares, everybody ignores him. And he's like, you see, I told you. Like, that is basically where these men were at before they left. Them leaving, it's such a subtle shift because, you know, when they tried, they were already pretty much invisible. And finishing off the model that I set up on society, the abundance has been taken from men. They can't start families because of that. It's been given to women. It's harder for them to start families because now their standards are higher. The only thing that a man truly has to offer in the modern world is his genetic looks. Is how tall he is his hair, is his face, is his frame, is his genetics. That's all that men have left. And yeah, I will just go out and say that this model that I am establishing here, I think it's very accurate. I think it's accurate to what's been happening pretty much ever since rap music became popular. Just thinking about music stuff, you know, I was looking over a post where people were talking about the death of rock and roll, how hip-hop was pushed artificially to kill rock bands because rock bands created a kind of problematic community for the establishment elite. You know, me and all my friends listened to, like, maybe the tougher guys listened to, I don't know, the Casualties or the Misfits, or they were stuck in, like, classic rock, AC/DC, Jimi Hendrix, and then I listened to emo and pop punk. Some of the weird kids listened to, like, Korn and nu metal. It just seemed like all of a sudden, out of nowhere in, like, 2006, everybody was listening to, like, Lil Jon and Lil Wayne. And I really think it was around that time that this hypergamy model started to establish itself. That's around the time the iPhones came out, 2007. It was around that time that this model started to establish itself. And once you get like 2 or 3 years into the swipe apps, that's about the time that women started to realize, wow, you know, I really, like, don't need to give these fucking regular guys a chance anymore. So yeah, that's been established time and time again. But men are just going to continue leaving society. And eventually it will get to a point where normies try to acknowledge it somehow. And it's like, do you know a chud who doesn't have any friends and left society? No. These men are invisible to normies. The League of Shadows. These guys just slipped out unnoticed. And probably, like, the normies in your life that knew you, like, for me, you know, maybe you were, like, talking about your feelings a little bit on social media, and they tried to socially crucify you, and they screenshotted you, and they tried to do a big humiliation ritual, social crucifixion ritual in front of, like, a bunch of, like, horrible narcissistic people. That's probably all that happened. And then you're like, oh, fuck this. Like, this is completely toxic. Social media, if you haven't figured it out at this point, like, having your name and like, hi, I'm Jerry Seinberger, and well, I just took a trip to the grocery store, guys. They were out of Tabasco sauce. Like, having a fucking normie social media like that, if you still have one of those, I mean, you gotta have, like, an anime picture, and your name is, like, I don't know, I can't think of any examples, because they're usually, like, offensive or something, like, you know, Harry Balzania, 77769, you know, like, you gotta have a name like Harry Balzania, and you gotta have a picture of, like, an anime character, and everything in your bio has to be memes. Like, dude, if you actually have your real fucking, like, hey, I'm Richard Cranston. Wow, there sure was a long line at the store today. If you still fucking have a social media like that, which every person from my hometown does, of course, but, you know, they're normies. They don't figure it out till, like, 20 years. But, and then, you know, the normies, like, they all just comment on each other's shit. It's like, oh, those dang old long lines. I know exactly what you're talking about. I mean, the only purpose of normie social media is to surveillance and punish outlier behavior. And when anybody says anything interesting, like when you start to become like me, like a rogue philosopher, you're like, wow, I noticed that like the only purpose of this is to like monitor and surveil and harass people who say anything interesting. Like, well, that's just a really dang old unprofessional thing to say. I wonder what your CEO at McCuckbucks has got to say about that. I think I'm going to give him a call. That's all that social media is, bro. It's Orwellian surveillance shit. I read a lot of the book Gulag Archipelago, which Jordan Peterson talks about a lot. It takes you from the beginning of the process in like the NKVD's secret police communist Stalin regime. Like the very first step, what happens? You get arrested, then you get the intake, and then you're put in the gulag, and then there's the interrogation, and then there's the execution. Like it took you through every single step of how the secret police society worked in communist Russia under Stalin. And basically there's something called like the useful idiots. Like there's the useful idiots that loved to tattle on people to the secret police. It's like, he said something bad about Stalin. He he criticized communism. Like there was a kind of people, and it was said that it was the majority of people, that they really took pleasure in ratting people out to the state. And clearly, we already have had the same thing in the United States for a very, 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 very long time. And those are basically the people that dominate social media. You see it in dating on groups like Are We Dating the Same Guy? To where it's just so funny how women work in dating, because the guys that are on that group are the guys that are sleeping with lots of women. So on one hand, the men who aren't sleeping with lots of women, well, they're not being harassed in that group because they're not getting any dates. But well, that's your fault, and you're an incel, and it's because your personality is terrible. So shame on them. But then the guys that are good enough to get women, they're being posted about in that group. Well, you're an asshole, and you're a pig, and you're a cheat, and you're a liar, and shame on you. Shame on the guys who can't get me, and shame on the guys who can. So where does that lead logically when you get shamed for failing with women and you get shamed for succeeding with women, and then all the men indefinitely get shamed? It's just all pointing towards this. It's all pointing towards the same kind of society. So there's not like that much more to say about it other than that the League of Shadows, where have all these men gone? Who even are these men? Do you know a guy like that? Do you know a guy like that? They're invisible to normies. The churches. I'm not psychic. I don't know everything. I've been hesitant to start making a lot of content attacking churches, but I think people who pay attention to my live streams have seen that I'm having this particular questioning shift right now, and it's not about Jesus. It's not really about my deepest spiritual beliefs. I still pray the rosary and these kind of things. I still, hold Jesus as the Most High. But in terms of church, I believe, this is my prediction, that they're just going to become hen houses. That's a term that I've used for a long time. Man, one time in Vegas, I was interacting with some sort of like an urgent care, and I talked to somebody on the phone, and I made a comment about how everything there was run by women. It's like it's an absolute hen house over there. You got to get some men working there, like they're doing their nails and they're chit-chatting. It's like a freaking hair salon. I guarantee you I really pissed some people off when I said that. I think that might have been one of the first times I was put on some sort of a harassment watch list. Because, man, when you call women-dominated things a hen house, whoo, boy, that really touches a nerve. But churches are going to be old people, what is it called? Girl dads, wife guys, women, and then just like completely broken autistic guys who are like on a leash of their parents and their family, who women don't want, who the kind of guys that like are invisible to women, but they're not masculine enough to do anything about it or to even acknowledge it. Okay, so the churches are going to empty out of eligible men. And on some level, this has already happened. There's women, there was just a recent scenario where there was a recent convert to Orthodoxy. And she had a blog. So she's been Orthodox for like a week. And then she goes home on her blog and is like, what's wrong with all these men at church? I mean, come on. Why don't you take a shower? Put some gel in your hair. Work out for once. And they think that they're entitled. And she wrote this big hit piece. And some, like, frat, ortho bro was like, hey, guys, like, I realized that this woman is insufferable. Here's some fucking nudes that she sent me. And he sent them to everybody. And then, all the priests were like, how dare you? And they all jumped to the defense of this woman who's probably not even a real Christian. The guy who did that probably actually studies theology and actually was passionate about the faith. There's some really kind of toxically masculine ortho bro kind of dudes. I kind of dig it. Big Chad kind of guy. And yeah, he got nudes from this chick like within a week of her joining the church. So, he kind of like knocked her down a peg, and ultimately it's like what's right is right, and you wanted to mouth off, and you wanted to just be new to this church, disrespect all of the men in the congregation, so you got humbled. But, in the eyes of the priest and a lot of people, well, according to James, and then they're citing the Bible, and look, you guys, if you've been around for as long as I have, you can start to understand that, like, the Bible can be used to rationalize anything. Now, that's an entire video in and of itself, but to just give you a couple of comments so people who are new here understand, I believe that there is Jesus, Paul in the New Testament, and then there's the Old Testament. And the Old Testament contains a lot of different things as well. If you want to rationalize violence, you can use the Old Testament. If you want to rationalize peace, you can use Jesus. If you want to rationalize this or that, you can use Paul. It just gets to a point where it's like I have seen so many normies and so many of the worst kinds of people try to just give me kind of like a smorgasbord of biblical citations, thinking with their twisted logic that backs up what they're trying to say. It got to a point where it's like, you know what? I don't really want to use the Bible for reasoning anymore. Doesn't mean I don't like the Bible. It just means I've seen kind of the bottom line. But the whole point of telling that story is that women are already not happy with the selection of men at church. And it's because Chad isn't there. And my theory is that Chad's not there because he already has infinite women. There's no reason for him to get married. There's no reason for the lower 70% of men who aren't Chad to get married because it's become very obvious that women just want to have sex with as many of these high status guys as they can when they're in their peak in their 20s, and then maybe they can like marry some schlub who has a fat paycheck and then give him a hand job every month and a half in the dark for like the first few months or so. Maybe there's a little bit of hyperbole to all of that. But that's pretty much what it is. Like, the last thing I wanted to add is that the churches are going to become boomers, the remnants of the boomers, because their time is kind of coming. Women, old people, the kind of boys who grew up watching Teletubbies and eating Jell-O, never getting diagnosed with autism, even though they obviously have autism. And they're like, oh, I love church, mom and dad. And they're 25, and their parents like secretly hate them. And they have absolutely no stake in society at all. And they also don't have the testosterone to be like, wow, I have absolutely no fucking stake in society at all. And I don't want to be here because it's a humiliation ritual. Just give yourself a pat on the back if you're like me, guys. Like, if you can at least be enough of a man to be like, this society has taken absolutely everything from me and I have no reason to contribute. Like, you actually deserve more credit than you get. You have some balls. You have some fucking testosterone. So, in summary, eventually the normies will have to acknowledge that all these men have left. And they're going to try to shame. It's like, oh, why don't they just stop being man children and man up and touch grass? You know, we've already put out this same article over and over and over again for the last 10 years, and more men just keep leaving. I think we might have to try to reason with these men. Okay, step one. Who are these men? Do you know a chud with no friends? Do you know a chud with no friends who does nothing? Anybody? Who are these people? The League of Shadows. And then you will be in the shadows in your chud den. They'll be like, wherever you are, men, wherever you are, please. Like, and man, I was thinking about, like, you know, Doge and Elon Musk and Trump talking about how we're all going to get $2,500 stimulus checks. Now, obviously, everybody loves free money, but I know a lot of people were like, man, $2,500, you know, things have been really hard lately. I could do some really special things with that money. I know I could have. And just, oh yeah, there'll be the Doge checks. Didn't happen. Nothing. And it's like, well, you can't expect free handouts, bucko. And then, yeah, that's kind of the status quo. It's like, nothing's given, everything is earned. And that's another video in and of itself. I don't know if I put the video out yet. Like, I don't believe in earning things. Why do I feel like I made that video? I don't know if I did. It's going to be a good one if I didn't. If I did, I could probably make a better version of it. But I personally I think this whole narrative about working for things and earning things, it's not reality. The further you go back in time, it's like, son, one day, all of this is going to be yours. Now it's like, you get a job and make a bunch of money, and then you're able to get a wife. What it used to be was you were given a wife, and then you were given a job, and you were given land, and then you had a family and worked. That's how it used to be. And they'll attack you for pointing out that that's how things worked. But yeah, families like used to take pride in handing things down to their kids. There used to be a dowry where actually the parents of the daughter would give things to the man when they got married because, you know, he was going to be the man of the house and they were going to build a life together. But the way that men are treated today is like they're completely fucking worthless, and if you've had a hard life, you deserve it. And I don't think people in the mainstream acknowledge that bad luck exists or good luck exists, And I would go as far as to say that most of the good luck, most of what men have to offer that gives them a leg up, is being a good-looking, tall, full head of hair guy. Kind of guy who played football in high school, was in sports and the wrestling team and all that. Basically, that is the only thing that can give you a leg up in the society anymore. And, you know, rich people still give their kids things, but then that's kind of looked down on. And I will say, in defense of rich people, that's just how it's supposed to be for everybody. Like, the you gotta earn everything, nothing's given, that whole boomer rhetoric is actually bullshit, bro. The families gave things to, because that's them. Your son is you. When you're giving your son all these lectures about how he doesn't deserve anything, it's like, that's narcissism, bro. That is betrayal. You should want your children to win at all costs. And I think it's been established at this point that the narcissism in the boomer generation is the likes of which we have never seen. And the way that women act today and the way that things are handed to women and taken from men is largely the work of boomers. And I think everybody knows that at this point. Everybody who's not a complete NPC. But, yeah, the further you go back in time, people were not just starting with nothing. But you got to understand as well that history is littered with serfs who just basically crawled around in the dirt and were covered in dirt and had absolutely fucking nothing. The one time in history where there was such an overwhelming amount of middle class success and abundance was the baby boomer generation. And someone like me, born in 1991, graduated high school in 2009. That's another video entirely. This is almost like hell on earth. And, you know, don't touch that dial because, oh my gosh, this is going to get so much worse. And that, my friends, is a snidbit of how I think it's all going to go down. So, God bless you guys. Man, I've been going hard. You know, I released a music video, Moggy Jr. single way back in February. Came out with another follow-up, Wartime, did Guitar Center Drum Off, and back to the drawing board. But you know what? It's good. I'm in shape. I got my health. I'm in it. I'm going to see what's going on with my lower back. It's really not that bad. Gonna go get looked at. We're all gonna make it, guys. Let's just... Sure. God bless you. See you next time.